Hello, and welcome back. Got to check if okay, cool. The audio is working. Hopefully, another quick one because life is happening right now, and I am so far behind on work and other personal commitments that yeah, I need to hurry up. So, luckily, today is only two chapters. Interestingly enough, it's quite a lot. So Genesis 25, we kick off with Abraham remarrying after Sarah's death. We learned of Sarah's death yesterday, and she was buried in the cave that Abraham purchased um, from the Hittites. So he marries again, and she has a bunch of kids. Um, I'd encourage you to go through it. I find the names end up being, it's easy to read over them. It's easy to like glance past them. Um, but at the very least, I think I'd encourage us to just keep it in the back of our minds because some of these guys show up again, and they mentioned, some of them become their descendants are the Asherites and the Letushites, the Leumites. Um, and some of them turn up later on, so it's worth just remembering and sort of knowing, if they come up later on, you've seen them here. They are related to Israel somehow. But yeah, anyway, what's interesting is, Abraham gifts his children, all his children. Um, he gives them gifts, but then he sends them away from Isaac, and Isaac remains the child of promise. And the Bible says everything that he owned, he gave to his son Isaac. So he really treated him as though he was his only son, and even God recognized him as his only son. But he dies at 175, and he is buried in that same cave where he buried Sarah. So he joins her in death. Um, then we get a account of Ishmael on his wives and children. Um, he lives 137 years before he dies. But then we focus in on Isaac, and we see again God's interactions with Isaac. So Isaac marries Rebecca, who Abraham's servant went to find from amongst his neighbors, or his family. And um, uh, one second, because I just got a message that I need to respond to. I'm just letting them know that I'm streaming and they're sending messages. Anyway, yes. So we see Isaac. Isaac marries Rebecca, but Rebecca is unable to give birth, and she prays. Isaac prays. Isaac pleaded on behalf of his wife. I think that's interesting because Rebecca is coming in as uh, a relative, close enough relative, but God's interactions has been with Abraham. And Isaac has obviously learned from his father. I mean, I always wonder I wonder the dynamic, right? Because Isaac he was about to die. His father was about to kill him, for God, and God stopped it. But Isaac obviously must also have a knowledge of God from his dad. Um, albeit, he carries on and he pleads with the Lord on behalf of his wife, and she becomes pregnant with twins. But even while she's pregnant, there's a struggle in her womb, and she then goes to ask the Lord about it. So I find it interesting that this could be me reaching this. This might not be as significant as it is to me, but in describing the interactions that God is having, it's Isaac first that pleads, intercedes on behalf of his wife, and then the wife now goes to ask the Lord about why, the the two children are struggling within her. So it strikes me as though she's learned from Isaac, who obviously learned from his dad about God. But either way, we meet Esau and Jacob, Isaac's twins, and when she asks the Lord why are they struggling, he says, there will be two nations. The older son will serve your younger son. And I think from here we start to see a tendency, and I'm trying to think. We also see, I guess, in not so much, but we also see it in Noah, where God is he's not following the tradition of the people. So the tradition of the people was the older son gets the most honor. We later on will see with even Jacob's when Jacob goes to get married, that the older daughter, was to be married before the younger. You know, later on, when Joseph brings his two sons, the older one is to be blessed more than the younger one, because traditionally the older one, has a certain birthright. Um, same reason why Ishmael, as much as it's contentious, I believe the Muslim Islam sort of flows from Ishmael. Let me just check this, because this is one of those things where I've heard it before and never confirmed it from myself. Um, uh, so I'm just gonna quickly um, check. Yes. So yes, Islam sort of flows from Ishmael, who is the older son, and Muslims use that to make the argument that he is the true son of promise, right? Um, but we start to see God, I think, confounding that tradition from even now. Isaac was the son of promise, albeit even though he was the younger son. Jacob is the one that's, the older will serve the younger, Jacob being the younger, and the older will serve him, even though Esau was the older. Um, and we see God sort of start to flip this tradition, and he does this a lot of times throughout his interactions with men, where he flips the traditions of man on their head, and shows his sovereignty over it, but also his grace. He takes the lesser and elevates him, and then humbles the one that's elevated. Anyway, we learn, after they're born, Esau born first, Jacob born afterwards. Um, that yeah, Pastor Lyle makes a good point in that by tradition, the older ones are usually the leaders, but actually, God also knows what each and every one of us is capable of and what our character is, and God ultimately chooses. It's a great point. Thank you, Mum. Um, and so the boys grow up, and Esau becomes a hunter, and because of his game, Esau's loved by his dad Isaac. Jacob, who is more calm, quiet, he stays at home, and he's loved by Rebecca, apparently. Um, but we get this weird interaction where Esau's come back hungry, and Jacob is cooking some stew. Esau wants some of the food, and Jacob goes, "Well, you know, trade me your rights as firstborn son for this food." And Esau sells it to him. Esau's just, he's hungry. He says, "I'm dying. I'm dying of starvation." And you're like, what good is my birthright? So he swears his birthright. So yeah, you can have the birthright for this stew. Now, in as much as Jacob's taken advantage of hungry, you know, a hungry man, it also shows that Esau didn't value his birthright. And so in the King James, we have it described as Esau despised his birthright. And you might have heard that same word despised in later on, do not despise small beginnings, do not despise your gifts. And despise, I think, is an unfortunate word because it means something very different now. In that, when I say I despise someone, I really don't like someone. But actually, in the Old Testament and in the Hebrew, it's actually when you don't value something. And so Esau here didn't value his birthright. And when it says don't despise small beginnings, it's don't don't lose the value of a small beginning. And so we start to see here, and this is going into a bit more, I guess, Bible study technique, where we should be mindful of the words that are used. When we read them now, when we read them today, we're reading those words, if we're not intentional, with the meanings that are associated with them today. In the English language, modern day English language, despise means to really dislike. And that's correct, except in the Old Testament, the word that gets translated despised doesn't quite mean that. And if we're not careful, we can start to lose meanings. So this is really good um, practice to be mindful of. You're reading a text that's been translated, and we've got great translations. So we've got great dynamic translations that try to capture the meaning and contextualize it today. And so I've got up, and I'll show you this actually, because we're getting into a bit of the weeds here, but that's the whole point, right? So on the right hand side, we've got the King James, which uses despised. Um, and I could even change to pull up the strong number, which is the original Hebrew word. But we've got translations, dynamic translations that try to capture the meaning. And so when you look at the NLT, the New Living Translation, that doesn't try to um, translate the words word for word. It tries to translate it by meaning. And it says he showed contempt for his rights as the firstborn. So it doesn't, it doesn't use the original word. It captures the meaning behind it. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, Pastor Lyons, exactly. The English language doesn't fully explain what the language truly means in the Bible. Um, and I think as as good Bible students, which we all should be, we should be mindful of that. We should be mindful of the fact that the English language now, especially, doesn't fully capture what the original language is meant. But by God's grace, we have so many tools by which we can go back and look into some of these things. And again, these are all free tools that we should be taking advantage of in our studies. And so Esau sells his birthright for the price of bread and some stew, and he goes. And I think it's worth us sort of keeping this in the back of our mind. It gives an idea of who Jacob is, but also gives an idea of who Esau is, right? Because these aren't things that they took for granted. Like birthright is serious stuff, especially in that time. Even now, even now, it's serious. So that's 25. And then we carry on. So Isaac moves to again Gerar. Interestingly, the same place that Abraham also went to, and Isaac does the exact same thing. Now, I think this does speak to the nature of society at the time, where it's a very real and present threat that a man could be killed for his wife. And so Abraham was scared, and was if we go into this place, they might kill me because my wife is beautiful and take her from me. So say she's my sister, and Isaac does the exact same thing. Uh, uh, um, he goes down and he says Rebecca is his sister, and King Abimelech, same dude, sees, apparently looks out of his window and sees Isaac caressing his wife, and says, clearly she's your wife because you don't caress your sister like that. Uh, oh, good. Mom's pointed out it still happens in some countries today. Scary, scary. Um, but again, Abimelech, he chastises Isaac, and actually puts a law in place that anyone that touches him or his wife will be put to death, which again goes to show the favor that Isaac has found with Abimelech. Um, Isaac is also blessed. In Genesis 26:12, it says, when he plants crops, he harvests 100 times more grain than he planted because God had blessed him. So God was growing his wealth and blessing his efforts. Um, so much so that the Philistines, where he was living, actually became jealous of him, and they would fill up his wells with dirt, which is again very very petty. But it again shows, these are, he's living amongst them as a foreigner, and he's prospering, and it's so much so that they are actively trying to sort of hinder him. um, and eventually he's become so prosperous that Abimelech orders him to leave the country, and says, go somewhere else because you've become too powerful for us. And so he moves away, um, and I believe he actually goes to. It says where he goes. Well, yeah, it says he departed and pitched his tent in the valley, Gerar Valley. So it moves away from Gerar. Um, and even there, he opens up some wells that his father had dug. Um, yeah, very, very true. It is truly favor. So Pastor Lai has pointed out, it's God's favor for you to be able to move to a place and become more powerful, more prosperous than the citizens themselves. You know, um, and I think it's again, we're seeing God's interactions with people, but I almost, and I guess we can become guilty of this, but there are lots of us that are also foreigners in a foreign land, and I think when we, or when the enemy tries to, so as I'm saying this, I'm thinking a bit more deeply on sort of my experience. I was born here, but my dad and mum, so I think I'm first generation, um, born in the UK. Um, my dad and mum had moved here from Ghana, and I guess this isn't an uncommon, and I didn't think I was going here, so that's why I'm being mindful because I haven't thought on this to share. But my it's not uncommon amongst the African community here to be very aware of the fact that they are foreigners in the land. We last year had the debacle of people putting up flags, and that you even in my area, there's still some Union Jacks up on light poles, and this sense of you don't belong here, and you shouldn't be here. And I think, unfortunately, we have a lot of internalized inferiority that sometimes plagues Africans living here, where they don't feel, well, they very clearly, the society very clearly makes you feel like you don't belong. And therefore we tend to sometimes shy away, and There's an African way of describing. We don't go looking for trouble. We don't try and stand out. We try and stay quiet and calm, and do the least possible, make the least amount of waves, and that manifests in many different ways. From not pursuing ideas that we might have to, literally not wanting to make trouble for yourself by being too successful, and we just want to do as little as we can, send money home, and go back home to go and enjoy. Um, but I think we can relate to, if you are a child of God, then wherever you are, if you serve Him, if you follow Him, because Isaac did serve and follow God and had a relationship with God, then wherever you are, He can establish you. And I don't want to read too much into, oh, God did this for Isaac, so He will do it to us, and if God bless Isaac, He'll bless us. I think there is truth to that, because all the promises of God to Abraham, which He as reestablished with Isaac, are yea and amen in Christ. So we can claim that, based on the word. We can rest on that promise. Um, but I think we can also take comfort in knowing that wherever we are, we can be established if we follow and respect God. Earlier on in chapter 25, God said, in talking about reestablishing His covenant with Isaac, He said, "I will do this because of Abraham, because of my promise to Abraham, who obeyed all of my requirements and worshipped me." You know, um, and dare I say, we can relate to that. We can, if we obey God and worship Him and live our lives as such, that He can establish us wherever we are. That was a sidetrack that I didn't think I was going to go on. I didn't know I was going to go there, but yeah, I think that's part of my experience as a foreigner in this country, kind of, because I'm also born here, and you know, I'm just as much English, as maybe more English than Ghanaian by some accounts. But there you go. Anyway, Isaac, having moved, still was facing, he was still facing issues with the people from Gerar, who were still trying to sort of, they would fill up his wells with dirt and claim that wells that he and his servants had dug were theirs, and there was lots of conflict. But eventually he dug a well, and they didn't come and fight over that one, and he named that place Rehoboth, which he said, "At last the Lord has created enough space for us in this land." Um, and so Isaac carries on. He builds an altar there. He worships the Lord. So as I said, he also carried on a practice of worshiping the God of his father. Um, and Abimelech comes to him, and Abimelech did this as well with Abraham. He came to Abraham and went into a treaty with him, recognizing that you are powerful and the Lord is with you. So let's make a covenant that you don't hurt us, we won't hurt you. And let's make this a covenant between our two peoples. And I think it also says something about Abimelech. He seems to be a king that is wise, and was forming these treaties to keep peace between powerful neighbors who could easily become enemies and cause trouble. So it's a pretty proactive king. But alas, they do that, and Isaac goes into a covenant with them to not ever interfere with Abimelech, and his people would not interfere with Isaac. So we end chapter 26 with um, Esau, and Esau having married two Hittite wives. Um, but apparently, those wives made life miserable for Isaac and Rebecca, and that's where the chapter ends. And so, I guess tomorrow we'll find out what that means and what that meant for um, Isaac and Rebecca living. Sorry, uh, yes, Isaac and Rebecca living with Esau's wives who were causing trouble for him. Um, and Pastor Lai has just pointed out, yes, we should always ensure to use wisdom and make peace where possible. We can definitely learn from Abimelech. he seemed to be one quick to go and try and find peace and establish peace with those that he was around. So tomorrow's readings are Genesis 27 to 29. And again, I do hope this encourages you to pick up a Bible. Thank you so much, Pastor Laya, for jumping in. And I know Pastor Manuel's there as well. So thank you both. It's such an encouragement that you guys watch. It's also pressure. um, but no, thank you. And yeah, whenever whoever watches this, whenever you do, thank you for watching. And I do hope it encourages you to pick up the Bible and give it a read. Let's spend time with God this year, every single day. He's more than worth it. Yeah, the few minutes it takes to read and to just think about this and talk about this on here is the least that we can do. We should be doing more, spending more time with God. It's for our benefit. Anyway, I'm gonna get some work done, and yeah, hope you guys have a good rest of the evening and a good rest of the week. And it's only Tuesday. All right, peace out.